So welcome, you guys. This is the first edition of our TCR dialogues, and I am so happy and impressed by this guest that we have today because she has done amazing things in the last 3 weeks. Let me introduce you. I'm going to give. Well, first of all, let me just tell you who I am because you probably don't know who I am. My name is Kiratiana Freelon. I'm a journalist based in Rio de Janeiro, and you've probably seen some of my work in the Christian Recorder over the last 3 years. And I'm also a member of Cary Temple AME Church in Chicago, where my mother, Reverend Sheila Wilson Freelon, is the pastor. So let's get to our guest today. Today we have with us Presiding Elder Stacey L. Smith. She is the presiding elder of the St. Paul, Minneapolis district and the Canadian Annual Conference, and she's also the pastor of St. James AME Church in St. Paul. So obviously, as the presiding elder of a district that includes Minneapolis and St. Paul and a local pastor, her life became irrevocably intertwined with the uprisings that enveloped the cities and the nation when Minneapolis police killed 46-year-old George Floyd. And on June 2nd, she led a silent clergy march in which more than 300 clergy of multiple faiths marched through the two cities. So in this 1-hour chat, we will talk about her experience as a religious leader, mother, and community member during this transformative moment in American society. Now, I'm going to ask quite a few questions, but I want you guys to start preparing your own questions because after my second questions, I'm going to start taking questions from the audience because we want to get you guys involved in this very important discussion. So, Presiding Elder Stacey L. Smith, we got to start. I want you to tell us who you are. What are you all about? And tell us, how did you get to Minneapolis, St. Paul?
Well, thank you, and for inviting me. Did you say this is your first annual, recording?
First live that the Christian Recorder is doing. So, and wow. So you're our first guest.
Oh, wow. What a privilege. What an honor. Thank you for inviting me to be with you all today. Well, how did I get to Minnesota? Long story, but pretty much short and in the box. I came here with my husband about 26 years ago now. His job transferred us here, and that's exactly how we got here. But when I got here, I started looking for churches and things like that right away. I'm a 5th generation AME, so wow. I wanted to be So I wanted to be in an AME church.
That makes it easy.
That makes it easy. That does make it easy. So I was looking for our AME church, and that's how we kind of got settled into the St. Paul and Minneapolis areas. And so, but to kind of also tell you a little bit more about myself, I was born and raised in the 3rd Episcopal District. And I'm a proud past member of my home church, which is Ebenezer AME Church, which is in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. Oh, cool. And my mother, Elmira Lloyd, still goes there. I'm the youngest of 6 children. And but I spent a lot of time in 25 years in corporate, and I spent a lot of time in leadership, from diverse, managing diverse groups of health and operations, communications, and then finally in human resources. And then I was kind of called into the ministry from there, and heard my calling and kind of didn't run away from it. I kind of ran to it, which is kind of really different right now. Most people run. I ran to it and tried to find ways, and God just opened up so many avenues for me that I knew that it was truly where I needed to be.
Nice. So I guess that leads us to one of our most important questions. Given the fact that you live in the St. Paul and Minneapolis area, I would like to know how you found out about George Floyd's murder, because even as a journalist, I didn't find out about it until the day afterwards when, it was being shared on social media. So I would imagine that maybe your connection to this travesty is different, being that you lived in Minneapolis. So tell me what happened and what were your immediate thoughts and action?
Yeah. Well, it was really the day of, and we were preparing for dinner and things, and my daughter ran downstairs and she says, "Hey, Mom, have you seen this video that's out there?" I said, "Video of what?" And she said, "There's a man that was killed by a police officer in the Twin Cities. This video was going viral." And I said, "No, I hadn't seen it." And at first I said, I didn't really want to see it. Because right away it hit my heart, and I was like, oh gosh, here we go again. But eventually I did look at it, and I have to still admit I couldn't watch it to the very end. So I have seen parts of it here and there since the initial watching it when my daughter showed it to me. But I was watching, and what hit me so much was the fact that this police officer appeared to be gloating with his knee on this man's neck. And he kept saying, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And then the other parts that I looked at and have seen since on television, everything where he was calling for his mother, which I later learned, had previously passed away about 2 years ago around the same time. And so I was, just totally, I went numb because I didn't know what to think outside of feeling rage coming to me, and this anger and this sorrow and heartbreaking. I mean, there was just a myriad of emotions that I felt at the time. And in a sense, I was just standing there, not knowing what to do with myself, or not knowing what to do with what I had just seen. And so I was just kind of, for lack of a better word, probably paralyzed.
And has your family had any interaction with the Minneapolis police?
Well, not the Minneapolis police, but with the St. Paul police. In 2000 and the end of 2018, December of 2018, my son and his friends were doing a regular Friday night thing that a lot of, young folks do. They got together and they were playing video games. And I guess they were laughing and, maybe saying, "Oh," and whatever else, loudly. And his friend lived in an apartment building. And so I guess someone may have called the police and said, well, they did. They called the police on these young men. And what happened then, the police ended up at the door of my son's friend's home or apartment. And what could have gone sideways actually turned into a moment where God was glorified. The police officers came in, found out they were just a bunch of guys having a good time on a Friday night. They weren't doing anything to hurt anyone. They were just playing video games. They weren't selling drugs. They weren't doing anything wrong, and just having fun. And so the police actually came in, St. Paul Police Department came in and started playing games with them. But the part where I said, this thing could have really gone sideways, because 2 police officers walked in, but there were 8 standing outside of the door.
Oh gosh, it's crazy.
Yeah, 8 standing outside of the door. And that could have gone wrong. And in the face of all of these things happening, with Ahmaud Arbery and all of these other young Black men who have been killed. Here, my son could have been very much so one of them. I could be joining the March of Mothers mourning about their sons dying senselessly at the hands of police officers. So this is really, even though, like I said, it turned out well, it ended up, being a promotional opportunity for the police, and it was carried throughout many of the networks that the police officers actually ended up playing video games with these young men. So it really, I'm grateful, thankful to God for that being turning out the way it did.
I want to shout out to the people who have joined us. We have 70 people watching this live video. Congratulations. Wow. Thank you for those who have already commented from the 4th District, Cary Temple AME, the South Conference of the 11th Episcopal District, the 12th Episcopal District Union AME Church, St. James AMEC Chicago, 4th District. And please, if you are here, please comment in the section of your district and your church to let us know that you're there. We also have Grant AME 4th District, Toronto, Canada, where you're located, and the 12th District again. And I just want to remind our viewers, please come in with your questions. Please post your questions in the comments. She's ready to take anything and everything that you would like to ask. So my next question to you is, not only how did you react as a religious leader, but how did your church members react to Floyd's death and the subsequent uprisings? And can you even tell us how your kids reacted, your daughter and your son?
Wow. Excuse me. Well, let's start with family first, because that was the first initial impact that I had, because we were all home and it was Memorial Day. So, we were cooking on the grill and doing things, but immediately after we saw the video that day, and then subsequent videos from news feeds, and then watching the late news, it became very solemn. And I watched my son, my daughter, my husband, we all kind of just stopped. And actually what we did, we came together, we prayed. And we prayed for the Floyd family. We prayed for the Minneapolis Police Department. We prayed for the people in the community. We prayed for both of the Twin Cities. We prayed for just the peace, because we understand what this really means when something like this happens. But we also truthfully pray for our own anger and our own disappointment and our own disgust about what happened, and asking God to help us and strengthen us in this moment and this hour, because once again, it was painful. We were hurting and we were angry. So we needed to have our God step in and help us to work through this moment in time.
And what about your church? Can you tell us more about where your church is located? Like, how close is it to where this travesty happened?
Well, let's see. My church is located in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is across the river from Minneapolis. The Mississippi River divides us, and but it's probably really, I don't know, maybe about 5-6 miles from where Ground Zero is, at 38th and Chicago. Maybe not even quite that far, but when we really had kind of, heard about all of these things happening, I started talking to some of the members of the church and some of the members also in the community. And, once again, they were feeling much like myself. They were hurt. They were angry. They were saying things like, here we go again. When is enough going to be enough? Wow, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to act. I don't know how to feel. And that's how, the members were really feeling, in the church, and not only in the church, they were feeling that same way in the community. And not only in the community, but, there were, even into Minneapolis, and then our other pastors, since I'm a presiding elder, I was talking to some of my pastors, some of the other ministers on staff. They were all feeling very much so the same way. Some reacted differly. Some actually got out on the protest line, and they were out there right away. We have some powerful ministers who are just not afraid to get out there and to protest. And, I'm excited about that, because we need that. in this day and this hour. You know, Reverend Brenda Johnson is one who she's not afraid to just get out there and hold up her protest sign and stand on the line, and just be shouting, "No justice, no peace." You know, so I'm really proud of our ministers and our pastors that are here in the St. Paul, Minneapolis district and in Canada. And Canada actually sent lots of emails and lots of posts and things where they were, you know, joining right in with me. And so, and even sending words of encouragement as, you know, we were here in the city, we're praying for you, you know, we were there with you. And so it's been very interesting what's been going on.
And did you expect that St. Paul and Minneapolis would react to the murder the way it did? I feel like even as a journalist, I didn't expect this to happen this way. What were your expectations as someone from the city, as a pastor?
You know, I don't know if I had an expectation. You know, what happened was unprecedented. I mean, it has never happened like this before. Anytime that we are that a protest happens, or anytime that a Black or brown body is killed at the hands of the police, there is an outcry, and the outcry comes from our community. Our outcry comes from, you know, decades and generations of hurt and pain, of injustice for senseless and needless killings. But the one thing that I have to say that surprised me more so than anything else is that this time, when Mr. Floyd was murdered, that this time it wasn't just Black and brown bodies out there protesting no justice, no peace. We had more white bodies out there than the Black and brown bodies. And this started in Minnesota. And it wasn't just, you know, it was our youth, it was our young adults that were out there on the protest line, and they were out there day in, day and night, wanting to see justice happen. And that is, I think, what impressed me the most. And I really was moved by that more so than anything. And because I've never seen that before. Nice. You know, I remember as being a child in the 60s and being very young, but seeing Martin Luther King march on television thing. But most of the time it was us, you know, it was us. It was Black people you know, that were out there marching, you know, and holding up signs and everything. But this time it was just so very, very different. And I think what has happened, it has spread throughout the world. And then when I started hearing that there were protests in Germany, of all places, you know, I was like, for the same reason, I'm like, wow, this is powerful. And then, you know, started hearing about, you know, places in France and places in London, and people were standing up. But every time they showed the protest, they were people who were more Black, brown, white, and indigenous. And so I was so amazed by all of that this thing went global. It sure did. It wasn't just something that happened here. Yeah.
So that leads us to my next question. We know that you organized a silent clergy march. How did this come about? Like, how did you feel the calling? You know what? I'm gonna organize a multi-faith silent clergy march. And please tell us why you decided to do a silent clergy march.
Okay. Well, actually, in the midst of all of this, I had a vision, and I have to say it just came from our God. And the vision, all I saw was that there were a bunch of clergy in their robes doing a march. And after the death of Mr. Floyd, I realized that this is the time where that march must come. So I began to try to contact as many people as I know. I'm also the vice president of the Minnesota Council of Churches. So I reached out to the Council of Churches. I reached out to all the African-American judicatory heads of communion here in the Twin Cities. And they were like, we're right with you. We're ready. We'll do this. But the vision of the march truly came because I really felt that it was time for the church to come out. It was time for God's soldiers and his generals to truly come out and be on the front line. There's too many times we're out there, but they don't really see us. Mm-hmm. So the vision that I had was that we were marching, but we were marching in all of our clergy robes. And so when I reached out to everyone and I asked them to wear their clergy robes, or their vestments and things that they have to identify that they were clergy, I wanted this also to be an interfaith march. So whatever denomination, whatever faith walk you come from, this is about standing up. So for God. And so what I also wanted this to also be was that it's a Black clergy led march. And then that anyone who was, non-Black or brown, that they would march behind us. And the semblance of that I saw in the dream was that because too often we're out there by ourselves and we don't have backing from other denominations that are non-African American. So this was the power of this, was the fact that our white brothers and sisters from all walks of faith, all in their vestments and robes, came and marched behind us as a symbol of saying, we've got your back. And I was so moved by the amount of people that showed up. In Minneapolis, we had about 300 clergy members to show up. And in St. Paul, we had about 500. And then we had our congregations. We had officers from our churches. We had our YPD was marching with us. We had every walk of the church and every office and auxiliary of our churches marching with us. And in this particular picture, you can see how far back the march goes. It was so I would say that probably about over 1,000 people were at each march.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
And
it was a very powerful time.
And can you tell us more about just organizing that? Was it just as simple as sending out a couple of emails, or did you have to get on the phone? Like maybe some people who are watching might want to replicate this.
Well, I tell you, I am not an activist. I am not an organizer, and I'm really not even a boots on the ground kind of girl. But that's why I said this is truly of God, and the Holy Spirit was moving, because this could have not happened if God was not in it. And it just so happened that I had this burning inside of me, and what I felt that I should just speak it out one day at one of the meetings that we were meeting about Mr. Floyd, and beginning to pray and talk. And at that time, I happened to speak about what my vision was and what I had this dream about. And they said, well, hey, we got to do this right away. And we pulled together a group of people, and in less than 24 hours, this march happened.
Wow. I did not know it was less than 24 hours.
It was less than 24 hours.
Wow.
Less than 24 hours. So it is truly a blessing that, except the Minnesota Council of Churches and so many different organizations helped. I didn't do all of the logistics and things. I had a lot of help from a lot of people. And the one thing that was such a blessing, when I began to see exactly who showed up for this march, because I just thought, okay, it's going to probably be about 25 of us, and we're just going to go and we're going to march to the site, and we're going to pray, and we're going to say a few words, and we'll go and we'll meet over in St. Paul and do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So when I arrived, I thought, okay, I'm going to get here early. Well, when I arrived, there was probably already over 200 people waiting. So I was like, oh, this is amazing, Mm-hmm. And as we were getting organized, so many more kept coming and coming and coming. And what was phenomenal about it is that when I said it was interfaith, we had Buddhist monks that came in,
Nice.
in their robes. We had Hindus. We had indigenous chief leaders and things.
Oh, nice.
It was just phenomenal to see who all came to this march, and they all were feeling enough's enough. Nice. Now's the time. We have to stand up. And what I really felt, I just like from the book of David, when David was going up against Goliath, in my heart, I felt that who should ever defy the army of the living God? And we are God's generals. We are his specific ones that he places in all of these different areas to bring light in a time of darkness. So I felt that, you know, as we did this march, that not only shall we march, but marching silently. And the silent part came not only as a witness, but it came because not often, and many times there has been pushback from clergy showing up at marches in the recent years. And so I really didn't know how this was going to be. So I felt, well, we better go in praying. So, and that's where the silent part came from, that we would go in praying. And as we were praying, going into ground zero of 38th and Chicago, at the site of Cup Foods, as we got close in, I heard this young man who was one of the security that they had around the site. He says, "All right." He said, "The preachers are coming." He says, "We have been waiting for you." And I was like, and that's when I knew, yeah, God, can't nobody beat you. So that let me know, that was confirmation that God, and it was truly in it. And he was going before us as he did the Israelites, and like a pillar cloud. So I was like, thank you. And then I knew right then and there it would be okay. And so it was very powerful. And I think one of the most powerful moments when we were at the site in Minneapolis was the fact that one of the clergy that we had to pray, Bishop Howell, he said that let's just recite the Lord's Prayer. And when we began to recite the Lord's Prayer, of course, clergy and people that go to church and that are Christians know this, but it was like resounding all over. It's like everyone was reciting the Lord's Prayer. And I was like, wow. And even if they haven't been to church in a very long time, or if they, weren't churched anymore, they were reciting it. And to me, that was one of the most pivotal and phenomenal moments that happened. And everyone was on one accord.
Nice. Wow. Well, we have 116 people watching this. Thank you so much.
Wow. That's awesome.
And I hope that you guys out there are getting your questions ready. We have so many more people. We have, Second Episcopal District, Payne Memorial AME Church. Wow, we've got a lot. Thank you so much for all these people who are online. And oops, accidentally put that on there. So my next question, and once again, we're just reminding our viewers, please comment with your questions so we can start answering those questions. So my next question, let's talk about what this movement is all about. What do you think about the demands of the protesters, which is abolition, meaning abolition of the police, how we see it, how it is today, which includes defunding of the police? What do you think about these requests, and do you support these requests?
Well, going back to the march and another reason why, this happened. Another thing, even though, like I said, I'm not a boots on the ground kind of girl, I do believe that protest without something happening afterwards, excuse me, is you're just a loud clanging cymbal. You're just out there for a photo op. But I actually believe that once the protest march happened, that there had to begin to be some next steps and policy changing behind it. I know what has come immediately after, and it's phenomenal what the defunding of the police department. It started out with the University of Minnesota, which is, a very large, major university here in the Twin Cities, and them not using police protection and assistance for games, for basketball events or any kind of events that they have. That was a huge moment and a pivotal moment. And it began to give pause and began to have people really begin to think about, maybe there's something more to this that can happen. And I think the University of Minnesota began to lead that in the Twin Cities with defunding the police and taking away the base of where they get money to continue the efforts that they're doing. So what do I really think about it? I'm not sure yet, because there's a lot that goes around defunding the police. We all realize that we do need some law and order. We need law and order, or else things would just go to put. But defunding, giving them less power, less resources to continue to have the tactics and things that they've been doing, I think that's a good thing. But we do need law and order. So abolishing them completely, I'm not sure. But what I will say is that definitely they have to do something about the militarized actions that they have been taking. Maybe disbanding the police department as we know it today. I think the police union is one of the main areas that needs to be dismantled somehow or another. I don't know if that's even possible, but it needs to really be looked into, because a lot of the things it appears have been maybe covered and held covert in that area. But pretty much if they are looking to dismantle, defund, but we have to still, like I said, and I'm sure it's not going to take place in a matter of a few weeks or a year. This is something that's going to be probably something over a gradual amount of time that happens. But I believe that these things have to take place right now. We can't wait any longer. We can't have another murder. But guess what? Right after Mr. Floyd, what else has happened? Here we go again. And it may not be in the Twin Cities, but it's in Atlanta, or it's in this place, or it's in that place. So what's gonna, where are we gonna let this stop? Black and brown bodies are still dying every day. And so we at the hands of police. So, why don't we look into these things? Why don't we become aggressive? Because we can't wait any longer. This is something that's definitely going to happen. And so therefore, protests without policy and things happening behind it. Now, this is, don't get me wrong, we were talking about the defunding of the police, but this is bigger. This whole situation is much bigger than the police. We're talking about the systemic things that have happened over time. We're talking about education. And even now, like I said, we're fighting two pandemics. We're fighting the COVID-19 and the racial pandemic that's going on right now. So the one thing we have to look at is, like, since COVID-19 has come in, the educational gap it was already wide. So now, it's like the Grand Canyon now. It's like, we have children that were in areas that did not have access to internet, did not have access to laptops, iPads to continue their distance learning. So we have children that are so far behind, and we had teachers that were sending home or mailing packets to their home without any instruction and asking parents to help. Well, if your parent is struggling with reading, and how are they going to explain that to you? You know, so there's a lot that, I mean, just in the educational area. And then we're talking about, you know, I have this thing where I say, and I've been saying it just in the last, and I have to realize it truly came from the Holy Spirit, because, you know, I just I wasn't thinking in this kind of area, but it came to me, and it says, you know, we often ask about equality and we want to be equal, but this came to my heart, and it was equality without equity is an empty dream for tomorrow. So equality without equity is an empty dream for tomorrow, or an empty promise also for tomorrow, because we have to have both. So when we look at those things in the midst of all of this, we have to not only look at education, we have to look at our own entrepreneurship. We have to look at Black businesses. We have to look at home ownership. I mean, that's the beginning of wealth right there in your home ownership. So these are things, real estate, and health, the healthcare, you know, we have to look at the disparities in healthcare. Those who are poor do not have healthcare, you know, so we have to look at some things becoming not only equal, but we have to have the equity to be able to provide those things in our own families. So I really look at, this is way beyond now, this is way beyond police. This is way beyond them. We're talking, we want the whole thing. We want what everybody else wants in this world. We want to live in peace. We want to have a house, you know, we want to have an education. We want to have peace, just like everybody else, you know. Why can't we? You know, why do we, you know, have to be poor? Why do we have, you know, we want what everyone else wants. And then basically an equal opportunity to have what most others that are white have, right?
So that leads me to my last question. But of course, we have 112 people watching. So it's going to be your turn to ask questions. Our last question is, you know, this uprising has gone national, it's gone global, and we know how national and global the AME Church is. And there are pastors out there who are still working amid uprisings in their cities. Can you give us some advice on organizing their response while supporting their congregations? Like, how have you managed to do this? You're not only are you leading marches, but you also have a congregation to serve. So please explain how you've managed to balance all this and give us some tips.
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Well, really, quite frankly, you know, I'm a novice at all this. I'm you know, new to being boots on the ground. And like I said, it is truly by the grace of God and His leading that I have been called to position for such a time as this. Truly, I have, you know, God has given me resources. He has given me, He has put me in positions and to meet people and be connected to people that I didn't even realize would be a help at this time. So what I would just say is, don't despise any humble beginnings. Don't despise the fact that, hey, I'm not an activist. You know, I haven't been on the protest lines all these years. I'm just the pastor. Just, you know, don't despise, you know, the fact that of your humble beginnings. You know, I'm right here. I'm humbly beginning this process. But the thing of it is that use whatever resources you have. And as a pastor of an African Methodist Episcopal Church, we have a great power that I have been blessed to see work at its finest in this day and time. We have the power of the connection of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I am grateful to Bishop Reed. I am grateful to my Bishop John Franklin White, and so many pastors across the connection who came to my rescue. So many who came and gave me an education in activism, gave me an education in how to began to formulate different things, and I was involved in conversations, but that was through the power of our connectional church. And so the church is not dead. The church is alive, and it is working, and is working well. And I've never been so proud to be an African Methodist Episcopal leader, pastor, presiding elder at this time, because the church, the way our church is organized, we have everything at our fingertips, including the Christian Recorder, of which we are on today. We are a phenomenal church. We're a phenomenal church with phenomenal resources, phenomenal access to and through a lot of areas. So I just have to say that use what you have. I did. And, you know, I'm no one special. I'm just someone out here doing the work each and every day. I have an amazing congregation of St. James African Methodist Episcopal Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. Whoop, whoop, shout out to my family. But they have been a phenomenal support to me in this day and time. I've had them, they've been out on the battleground, you know, with me. They have been out there cleaning up after the uprisings. They have been out feeding the hungry, trying to clothe the naked. They've been out doing everything they can. So if I had to put a shout out to pastors or ministers out there, like, you know, how do I do this? Use what's around you, because God has already provided it for you. God has already given you everything you need to do what you're called to do in this moment and in this time. And if you're looking for something to do, look at your local organizations that are boots on the ground. Go to the NAACP, go to your urban leagues, you know, work with these groups and your local churches. You know, to get involved somehow or another. You can even fight this battle by here in the Twin Cities. Since we had a lot of destruction and things happen to a lot of our local stores like Target and Cub Foods, which are major food chains in both the Minneapolis and in St. Paul. So we have food deserts happening. Figure out how you can feed those there's a lot of babies who need diapers. There's a lot of babies that need formula. There's a lot of mothers who need wipes, and there's things that are needed for every day, soap and toilet paper and things like that. This is needed. So if we can come to the aid of families in this time, I think that's a good place to start, but definitely working together with those agencies that are around you.
Okay, cool. Well, our first question actually comes from the editor of the Christian Recorder. And he actually has 3 questions. John Thomas, the third.
Okay.
So,
hi, John.
Wow, there's a lot of questions. So his first question is, how did you engage with younger protesters?
Okay. Wow. I think they just came. I asked in this process to be a part of it. I prayed. I have to say, really, I prayed, because I knew that, you know, sometimes clergy wasn't really wanted at some of these events, but I prayed, and it just seems like it just happened. Of course, in my church, you know, we have a lot of young folks and young adults. And so I really just took what I work with every day and the people that I work with every day and take how I approach them to engage others. And so far, it has worked. You know, just really being part of it, not trying to control anything, not trying to just all of us coming together as one body. I think that's how I've engaged in this area. These is such
great questions, John, by the way. Another question that he asks, and this is maybe a more political question, more church political question. How did Baptist and Pentecostal Black clergy react, which we know don't normally ordain women? How did they respond to your leadership when you organized the silent clergy march?
Wow, that is a good question. You know, at the moment, I really didn't think about that. I was just leading, and because I was out there leading for God, and I didn't have time to think about what everybody else thought about me. It was about what God wanted, and I had to lead with that first. But to tell you the truth, I have a great relationship with all of the other heads of denominations that are in our area, the men. I work very well. We work together in elders councils and Black ministerial alliances, and a lot of times I am the only woman in the room. But I think they have a healthy respect, and we listen to one another. And we've been blessed. I've spoken in their churches, I've preached in their pulpits. So I think they've accepted me as, you know, as part of their group. And we've just been doing well. And there is no, you know, separation that I could really see. But like I said, I didn't have time to wait for people.
That's probably the way to go.
Yeah.
So we have a question from Carrie A. Temple A and me from Pastor Sheila Freelon. She asks, any tips for indoctrinating youth in the area of activism over the summer season?
Thank you, Pastor Sheila. It's good to hear from you. Wow. Well, the best thing to probably do is, if you're doing anything in your church to help the areas that have been affected during this protest time, is to have your youth engaged, talk to them about what's going on. We, you know, are beginning to get our youth. We're still in the planning stages of so many things. This is like an hour by hour, day by day kind of thing. But for the silent march, I asked for all of the AME churches to bring their YPD out to the silent clergy march. And I told them to wear their YPD shirts. And so this was giving them their first, maybe some of them, their first upfront opportunity to be even a part of a protest. But I thought, you know, with us surrounding them, it would be safe. And but giving them also opportunity to participate in living history. So I just asked them to become a part of it. And then what we're trying to do is keep our youth around what we're doing. We've been, you know, we're going to be doing food shelves and distribution centers from the church. So we're just really asking that our children, as much as possible, because, you know, we still have to be safe in this time. And this is what the rub has been, is that making sure we're bringing everyone out and that we're safe doing this in this time. And if this what COVID-19 virus wasn't out, we would have our youth out and maybe in numbers to be, you know, those boots on the ground with us to deliver food, to help us, you know, organize the pantries and help us to deliver meals to our sick and shut in, or to whatever we would have to do at this time. But it's a different season that we're in. So it's we have to do things a little bit differently and strategize a little bit differently.
So another question that we got, another question from John. How did you, the last question, how did you react? How did you relate to the outside activists who came, like Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, etc.?
Wow. I had seen Al Sharpton. I've seen Reverend Jesse Jackson over the years. I have to tell you, when I, for lack of better words, I was so starstruck when I first saw him. I was like, wow, you know, they're actually at a meeting that I'm at, you know. But I have to say that it was powerful, you know, that they were there. It was the words that they spoke, the years of wisdom in these areas of activism was very reassuring when they came in the room. And I watched especially when Reverend Sharpton got up to speak, how a hush came across the room, and he began to speak to all of us. And he began to, first of all, he said that I wanted to come here because I wanted to see this for myself. And I needed to be a part of your grieving and your pain. And then he began to speak to us and basically console us on what we were feeling and how we were feeling. And so that was a privilege to be in the room at that point in time. And then Reverend Jesse Jackson, when he came as well, it was once again another reassuring time to have him present with us. But the fact that he brought with him the true understanding of, being on this line for years and years and years, and letting us know here in Minnesota and here in Minneapolis and the Twin Cities that something was happening here. Something that hasn't happened before was happening here. These were in the early days when he came. And, we all weren't quite seeing it, at that moment, but he was absolutely correct that something is happening in the Twin Cities. Something different has happened. A fresh wind and a fresh fire has fallen in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, a very unlikely place for this to have happened. And that's probably a design of our Father. What the enemy meant for evil, God's going to bring for good. But I think with those two coming, it really meant a lot to the community. It meant a lot to the clergy who were around to see it. And I think it brought a sense of beginning to formal organize when they came as well. People were already, boots on the ground. There were a lot of pastors out there talking to youth and trying to keep everyone, on one accord. But but when they came, there's something else that changed, and I think it was a true beginning of some formalizing and some real saying, okay, we're about to take some action here.
Oh wow!
So, yeah.
Wow. So that brings us to the end of this amazing conversation. Okay. We got up to 120 people on this live. I want to thank everybody. Wow. And I just wanted, before we absolutely end, I do want to just call out people, because lots of people have commented. So let me just call out some comments that I thought were actually quite unique. I thought this comment was quite unique from Carolyn Walker Kimbrell. I love it that the AME Church is fulfilling the role Richard Allen and our founders would be proud of today. Social justice is key. Cool.
Amen. Thank you, Carolyn.
And Kenesha Blake Newell says, thank you for your leadership and obedience to God, Presiding Elder Smith, the Grant AME Church in Canada.
Thank you, Pastor K.
And I'm also the producer. Not only am I the host, but I also do produce. Worship Coleman says, amen. Equality of opportunity is not the same as equity, which demands a reparative response.
Amen, Pastor Coleman.
And Christopher Brooks says, if it were not for the woman in the early church, where would we be today?
Oh, wow. Jarena Lee.
And let's get one or two more before we allow you to leave. Elaine Gordon says, praise God for your obedience to the Holy Spirit. God rode in by God's Spirit, made alive through each of you in that walk. And the people cried, we've been waiting for you. Hallelujah.
Thank you, Presiding Elder Elaine.
And what else do we have? Lots of positive comments over here. We got a lot of people shouting out their districts and their churches. And also from Joya Barnes Jones, that was an amazing day and a powerful testimony to the strength of our God.
Thank you, George. Yeah, she was out there protesting right along with me.
Oh, nice. So I guess that leads us to the end. Do you have any last words for our audience?
Well, I'd like to probably say this. God is in this right now. And no matter what evil, because this is evil, racism is evil, white supremacy, it's evil. There's no mistake about it. It's evil. And I have to say that, you know, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. And that we have to not be afraid to leave the church. And I'm going to say this, might get in trouble, but the church has left the building, everybody. The church has left the building, and we need to allow that to continue to happen. Like I said, I watched some phenomenal things that have just sprung up in the midst of the virus and the uprisings. I have watched, even though people are masked, they're still going out and they're cleaning up. They're picking up glass. They are washing down fire burned out walls. They are, still feeding the hungry, clothing the naked. I have watched the church come alive even more so in this moment in time, and that the church is not inside our walls. We are outside the walls, and we are working. We are protesting. We are living. The church has left the building, and we can't go back in. The same way we are out now. So continue to be out, continue to do the work that you can, even in the midst of this virus. God is not dead. God is alive, and he is our strength when we are weak. So just know that God loves us. This is a time. Keep praying for us here in the Twin Cities, because if we can get it right, there's a lot of momentum that's going right now to change policy, to open up equity, to open up equality, to change the way the systemic racism has been perpetuated in the state of Minnesota. So I believe that where the state of Minnesota goes, where the Twin Cities goes, where the state of Minnesota goes, so goes the world. So if we can get it right here in the Twin Cities, if it happens and the change begins to take place, then I believe it will not only happen here, it will happen in our nation, and it will happen across the world. I'm praying that we become the model of change for tomorrow.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We're still at over 100 people. Thank you so much for everyone who watched this. And this video will be available on Facebook if you mixed it. So just go on to the AMEC Publishing House Facebook page. Thank you so much, Stacey, Presiding Elder Stacey L. Smith, for spending time with us today. And obviously, we'll be praying for you, and we'll just keep you in our prayers as we move forward, because this is not over.
This is not over.
Over, okay?
Yes, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for allowing me to be your very first guest.
Thank you. Bye, you guys.
Goodbye.